Good. I'm really lucky to be here. Thank you to Leslie and the PancakesCon staff for putting this on. I did attend last year's event, and I just thought it was something that was so cool to kind of bring everybody together when we're all put in a really tough situation. And here we are almost a year later, and we're kind of still in that situation. And it's still really good to be able to connect with people. I know for myself and my family, it's really helped out, using technology during the pandemic. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So um, I'm here to talk to you today about hunting evil file hashes and processes using PowerShell automation and do it yourself, how to build and paint custom wood shelving. My name is Blake Regan. I'm a senior security analyst at Wesco Distribution. And my clicker is not working. So who am I? Blake Regan. I'm a father and husband. Actually, my wife and I found out that we're having a baby girl. We found out the gender yesterday, so I am now a girl dad for life. So very happy for that. I started in IT in 2010, and I formerly worked in the construction industry. You may notice the tie-in between the IT and hobby/craft for my talk. I really started information security working in the field in 2014. I have a sysadmin background, working in engineering, and then also in information security, most recently blue team digital forensics threat hunting. And I'm also a hockey fanatic, fan and player. I really love the sport. I'm glad that we got to have an NHL season somewhat this year. That has also helped me out during the pandemic, not able to get out and play, only watch it on TV. I'm sure many of you can relate to similar things in your life. I also enjoy mountain biking/trail riding. There's not a lot of mountains in Illinois, but we do have some pretty good trail systems, so I do enjoy that. I got into that earlier on in my life. My cousins who are older got me into mountain biking, and I just fell in love with it. So I recently got back into it, which is good. I'm an automation enthusiast. 2014, I started working at Motorola Solutions in the systems engineering, and my manager gave me a challenge to turn a Raspberry Pi into an automated USB scanner. Now, I knew Linux command line, but I didn't know how to do automation or, file detection, state detection, everything like that. And I ended up really liking that project. Actually, a coworker really helped me out during that project too, and it kind of sparked a passion. And I picked up PowerShell, and PowerShell and I are like this. So following that, serial learner. I have a couple certifications. I really enjoy, certifications. Everybody in the industry has a different opinion. For me, it's what kind of work do you put in during the time that you're preparing for that cert. It's not just that you passed it, but in my own journey, what I found is that doing that self-care and commitment, you end up learning so much more. So for anybody who's new to the field, who's trying to get into information security, keep at it. Take advantage of learning opportunities. It may not have to be a high price cert that takes you 3 months to prepare for, but just these little steps like attending a con like this today and kind of learning about some new things that maybe you're interested in, or pursuing that next cert. My personal opinion is that doing something like a Network Plus, Security Plus is a really good starting point because it's vendor agnostic and it focuses on the fundamentals. And I think that's one thing the information security community could do better on, right? You have a 10-character password policy, but you want to go cloud first. Or you have Windows Server 2003, but you're going to implement DLP, right? We got to get back to the basics. So my talk today is in my journey as sysadmin blue teamer. I find myself doing a lot of tasks, maybe repetitively, and finding opportunity to automate those tasks. And so this past year during the pandemic, I pushed myself outside my comfort zone, and I started developing tools that I used at work and making them be applicable to many situations, and then sharing that on GitHub, right? So it's not sensitive information just the frameworks or theories that other people can benefit from. So what I'd like to do today is demo a new tool that I've been working on. This is an improvement from a previous tool. I used to search for files. I knew where the file location was, and I knew the file name, and I needed to get rid of it. So I came up with a script to use Windows RM and pass that script to a large collection of servers. And instead of going manually to each server and doing this action like the old school days, now we're working with 1,000 servers, passing a script block and really being efficient and getting repeatable results. And so I came up with an idea to, it's kind of sparked in the past months where several large name vendors have had compromises, and CISA releases indicators of compromise that everybody needs to look for and detect. In some situations, you don't have, an EDR tool, enterprise detection response. You don't have a way to look for hashes, or maybe the tool that you have only supports MD5 hash and not SHA-256. So this tool will help you do that. It does make a couple assumptions. It assumes that you know the path that you're looking for and you know the hash that you're looking for. So let's go ahead and check that out. I've posted it on GitHub right before my presentation. I call it Hash Huntress. I think it's really cool. The PowerShell open source logo is this really awesome character that just looks like a huntress, and also kind of inspired from my daughter. She's just awesome. And so that was the fitting name for this tool. So let's go ahead and check that out. I'm going to switch over to a video real quick, so bear with me a moment. So the first part of this got a little choppy because Cam Studio doesn't like when you don't have anything active on the screen, the refresh rate flutters. So again, the part that was missing was that this tool assumes that you know the location and the hash that you're going to use. But let's play the video. And I recorded this because the demo gods, I don't know if I have enough karma to do well. So let's let the video do the work. Sharphound, found in Windows System 32 directory. And also Mimikatz, placed in the public downloads directory. So let's go ahead and take a look at the script together before we run it, just to show you some of the basics. So this script has been designed as a function. So you'll import the function into memory and then execute that function. To identify the indicators of compromise and file paths, as discussed before, I've set up a framework for you to identify areas to place SHA-256 hashes and file paths. If you need to modify this for different algorithms, you can do so just by placing a different algorithm in the hash value. You'll also notice that we're defining a script block named Hash Huntress. Script block will later on be passed to a collection of member servers using the invoke command script block parameter. We'll also be taking a transcript anytime that this script runs. It is difficult to capture the output from a script executed on a remote host, so we will be transcribing the screen output to document for later incident response use. If we look here in the script, it starts to test that path that you defined to see if that path exists. If that path exists, it will continue on and it will enumerate the contents of that path and pass it to the get file hash commandlet. Those contents will be stored in an array. If the path does not exist, that check will fail, and this portion of the script
will be checked and defined as false. We talked about the array of hashes, and we also talked about our check here. So this means that the path must exist to continue on to eliminate errors. Now that we have our array of hashes defined, we will use a for each command to iterate through each hash identified in the directory. We will then evaluate if that hash matches the hash value that you previously defined. If this turns out to be true, we will write an alert on the screen, which will facilitate documenting this in our transcript. And we'll also list the path of the hash match and the host name that matches on. This may seem trivial if you're working with 2 to 3 hosts, but in a large domain with 50,000 member servers and a large number of workstations, you definitely will want to have those uniquely named host names in your log files. So this second loop does the same as the first, and I'm just demonstrating that you may encounter situations where you need to search multiple directories with multiple hash values. Now again, this script is a proof of concept, and I've posted it on GitHub. So if you like the idea and want to expand, please feel free to do a pull request, to do a fork for yourself. The reason I'm sharing this is that I think it can help many people and also help you expand your PowerShell automation skills if that's something you're looking to do. So as we move down, this contents that we just went over define the hash huntress script block statement. Now, as we move down to the bottom of the script, we will see here that we are dynamically identifying our domain. This means that this script can be moved into different domains, and this is one last value that you have to update. As I mentioned earlier, we can define a collection of member servers that we wish to pass this hash huntress script block to. Here I have done a simple example using our domain variable to then define the distinguished name of the organizational unit that you wish to query member servers and assign to an array named servers. You'll see here the naming criteria are simply name and operating system, which we then evaluate to identify if the operating system match Windows Server 2012, 2016, or 2019. We then select the object properties, name and operating system. This qualifiers right here may match up with different CISA alerts or different incident response bulletins that you may receive. You can help to tune your criteria. Something that may affect Windows Server 2012 may not affect Windows Server 2019. You can then filter that out to make your results as accurate as possible. So moving on down to the end of the script, we reference our servers is the collection that we just created, and we say for each individual element in the array or each individual server, we want to invoke the command defining computer name, and from our array, this is why we take name and operating system. We say server.name to pass to this command, and then we define the script block parameter, and then we pass the script block of hash huntress to the collection. That will go off and do its work, and we'll see that here shortly. And then just something to close this review of the script out with is when you're using the start transcript and stop transcript commandlets, since we made this script into a function, when the function gets loaded into memory, it goes to evaluate the stop transcript commandlet. that will throw an error if no transcription is taking place. So what I have done as a workaround is at the top of the script, I dynamically assigned the file name that we will output our transcript content to using a timestamp, and then using the directory that you're running the script from as the base path, and then adding the name #huntress transcript and timestamp. This serves two purposes. This allows us to have a uniquely named file in the same directory. So if we run this script multiple times, we don't get an error stating that the file already exists or is locked by a process or so forth. This also allows us to define a valid variable that we know is going to exist, which we can then get around the shortcomings of the stop transcript commandlet and state that if start transcript is not equal to null, and we know that this is true because we defined it, we want this statement condition to evaluate to true. So therefore, we have done a workaround to stop transcript once the script finishes. I hope that makes sense. So let's go ahead and get to the fun stuff and take a look at our script here. Now you'll see right now we do not have any transcript file in this directory. So what I'm going to do is import this script into memory, as I stated. This will pull everything into memory, into a function, which we can now call this function by simply calling #huntress from the command line. You'll see that the script generates the transcript file and starts querying through the directories and evaluating hashes. We've already found our first match, which was Mimikatz that we saw, matching the hash that we provided. The script is moving on to the Windows System 32 directory, and then continuing on, as you'll see, we have web server, and then we're moving on to file server. Now this is a small test domain, but if this were a large production domain, this would take much longer as it cycles through the large collection of servers. So we'll wait for this to finish, and then we'll go check out our transcript. It looks like we have some IR work to do after this script is done generating results. You'll notice this is taking a little longer since this is a remote host and we are iterating through the contents of the Windows System 32 directory, gathering hashes, and then comparing these hashes to the hash that we defined.
The video feed's okay. My screen filter turned on at the end of the recording, and I didn't want to stop. So just a note there.
Okay, our script is finished. My screen is fading. We can see here that this lists the username that we ran the script with, the timestamp, also lists the host name that the script was run from, and then we also have the results of our script that generated for our file. And we see that these are 2 IOCs found on each host, and now we need to engage our IR team to go and identify what else we need to do. I hope that you find this script useful. And please do a pull request, do a fork, and thank you for watching.
All right, so that was Hash Huntress, and I think you can see the concept of the tool is to make things easier to detect IOCs at scale. So I was working on trying to iterate through all directories and then check hashes. I've been struggling with that because while you can define so many levels deep in a directory, if the file remains in that directory one more level deep, it won't find it. So I'm still thinking about that, but I know there's a lot of smart people out there. And if you know a way to do that, do a pull request. I think this tool is good to use. It has a purpose, right? It's not a showstopper and it's not the new hottest thing, but it is effective, it is efficient, and it works. So I hope that this is something that you can use or someone that you know can use. Um, and I'd like to transition on to talking about carpentry. I mentioned that my background was in the construction industry. I used to do remodeling, build homes, framing, trim carpentry, commercial remodeling. And in 2007, the US economy took a turn in real estate. And so I had to find something different to do. And I had always been good with technology, good with computers, and happenstance watched the movie Hackers and just fell in love with the culture, right? Just that clever playfulness, right? Understanding something well enough that you can find ways around things or be a better defender, right? And so, but carpentry and construction will never leave me. Over the pandemic, my wife and I remodeled our bathroom upstairs. And so for part of the project near the end, I knew PancakesCon was coming up. So I used a GoPro to, if I were to be selected, which I ended up presenting, use a GoPro to document making these custom shelves that we built in our bathroom. And I think that this could be something that you can do as well. And so I'd like to play another video. I will do a little narration on there and let's check it out. So give me a moment here so I can share that video. Share screen. All right, so at the beginning here, I'm doing a layout, and one of the important things about doing your layout, especially when you're attaching things to a wall to support weight, is you want to find the studs in the wall. Now, stud detectors work, but only so well. So I like the old school method where you use a hammer and a nail, and if you'll notice, I'm doing it right above the laser line because I'm going to be installing cleats for the shelf, so you won't see it. So if you watch here, you'll see that I do strike out a couple times on this inside wall here, but eventually you'll know that sound because also you'll be pounding the nail and it'll stop going, right? And you'll see me struggle to pull that out. So again, the importance of this is if you're putting things on a shelves, and also wear a mask. So we're transitioning here to manufacturing stock for the shelf. So when you buy lumber from the store, typically if you get clear or S4S, that's square 4 sides, the edges will be very sharp on all corners. So to take care of that, you want to use a random orbit sander. Random orbit, similar to a random number generator, oscillates and changes direction that it's cutting the grain of the wood. So it doesn't reduce material like a belt sander would to remove material. The orbital sander kind of opens up the pores of the wood. So it's stain important because you want to let that stain penetrate the wood. Or if you're painting, you want that primer to absorb. That primer gives you that good coat to get your finish paint coat on there. So you'll notice here that I'm cutting these. I've done my math and done my measurements. They'll be different in your home. So, but I'm doing my measurements here to make my pieces now that I've sanded them down and I've used a table saw to cut them to the proper width. We're now making them all the same size, right? And that's kind of something that I carried from construction into InfoSec, is sometimes it's important to be able to build a scalable solution, to start with small pieces, get them uniform, find out that template, that pilot, and then build up from there. So you'll see this later on as we install these shelves. So right now, I'm sanding the tops of the shelves, again, using that random orbit sander. You'll notice that I'm moving the sander in an up and down direction. If you were to be using a sander, you would want to maintain the same direction. You'll notice the grain of the wood is going perpendicular to my body. You wouldn't want to go across the grain with most sanders. You can do that with a random orbit sander because, as we talked about, it cuts that grain of wood in a different way. So this tool here you'll see is called a Kreg Jig. This allows you to make pocket screws. And you'll notice the angle that this is drilling on. The beauty of pocket screws is it allows you to join two materials together in a secure fashion without having to nail through or screw through the face of the material. And so after we finish drilling these holes and using wood glue, it's always important when you're working with raw wood and assembling it to use wood glue. Wood glue does some special bond between the fibers that really is very strong and will help to make sure that over time, if there's moisture changes in your environment, that the seams that you create don't separate or expand. And that really makes a difference when you're doing finished products like we're doing today. Also, my garage has been my office during the pandemic. So I had to protect everything with drop cloths and tarps to not get sawdust everywhere. And yes, it was cold during the winter, but there's many worse things that could happen. So you'll see one of these is assembled. And if you'll notice here, you'll see those screws are on an angle. That's that pocket screw that allows to have the travel ends up going to on an angle up into the face of the wood that you're attaching and securely attaching it. So I'm using an impact driver, and an impact driver is different than a screw gun because it operates on resistance. There's an anvil inside the head of the tool that hits on the spinning mandrel. And when that happens, it creates a lot of torque, which can securely tighten screws without stripping. And so that's how these Kreg Jig screws, you may notice that the end of the bit is a square drive bit, and that's to make sure that that torque, if you were to use like a Phillips or a +2 standard head, you may end up stripping that screw head. So that's the beauty of the square drive. You also notice that I have adjusted, you'll notice that I'm going to back out one of these screws because the face wasn't lined up correctly. So that's one of the things too with finished carpentry is you need to use your fingers a lot and trust your instincts, right? If it feels right, it's most likely going to be right. But if it feels like there's a big ridge or things aren't even, it's a lot of work. So you can see here that I got this as close as I could. Now I'm using that random orbit sander to sand these now two joined pieces of wood together and get them on the same plane on top so that when we paint this at the end, we'll have a nice even So here we're talking about, when I talked about earlier about scaling up and starting out with a template format and then scaling up, you'll see that my layout has now transferred using the laser level, which really helps you when you're trying to attach pieces of wood with precise tolerances. That laser level lets you use your eyes to get it right instead of holding the piece of wood up and then putting a level on top and trying to balance that and using the nail gun. If you're going to do a project like this, I recommend looking at a laser level. You don't have to get the most expensive one out there, but they will make a big difference, as you can see. So the benefit of us finding our studs in the wall is now we know for sure that we are attaching these in a secure manner. So if we put weight on these, we don't have to worry about them coming loose. And it's very important. Now, in this outside wall right here, this is the back of a shower wall. So again, this is why it's very important to make sure that you're hitting studs and not metal pipes. Now, if you're using the nail and hammer, you won't go through, you can go through a water pipe, but you really have to work at it. But if you're using a nail gun, you can go through a water pipe very easy. I have done it before. It is not fun. So please make sure to take the time and know what's, that collateral damage that could happen in the surface beyond what you're working with. It's very important. It also doesn't take a lot of extra time to do. Now you notice here I'm pointing to the screen, you can't see that. I'm scraping off the extra construction adhesive because if you let that dry and then go to put the shelf on top of there, that construction adhesive is going to be very firm and it's going to work against your level layout that you've done. So just make sure to clean up any excess there. And also when you're using wood glue, which I highly recommend, here we've got and wood glue really only works on raw surfaces, raw wood to raw wood. If there's primer there, you can use sandpaper and sand that raw and then use the wood glue to get that bond, but it won't work if it's primed trim to primed trim. It doesn't work the same way. You would want to use a construction adhesive. So here you'll see that we have our 4 assembled shelves that we put together. And when you cut these to width, give yourself a break. You can have a 16th to less than an 1/8 inch on each side because your walls aren't always going to be 100% straight or 90 degrees all the time. So give yourself a break. When you're using paint grade trim, you can cover up any of the extra gaps within reason. I say 1/8 of an inch is about as far as I would go. You can fill that with caulk, and you'll see that in a little bit here. I'm going to show you how to finish this really precise manner. And this is, I really enjoy this. I know it's tedious work, but for me, it's soothing. So I really got a lot of benefit out of this project. Working on the weekends, I started in July and just finished at the beginning of the year. And it really helped me to have kind of an escape, not an escape, but something to do and while I'm at home and be productive. So I'm priming the shelves here. It's important to use a primer on raw wood. It seals up the pores. And then after that dries, you can sand it. And now you're creating a nice base for your finished paint to cover. So you'll see here, get yourself a small roller. You don't want to use a 9-inch roller on 23-inch shelves. You get the small little 4-inch Wizzo rollers, and they work really nice, can get into tight spaces you'll see here. And now I'm working with putty. There's a specific kind of spackle that I like. It's the DAP Pino Patch. It smells terrible. Wear a mask when you use it, but it really, it doesn't shrink. So you'll see that I'm pushing and wiping in that putty into the nail holes. It doesn't shrink. So once it dries, you can scrape the excess off and then go ahead and sand, and you'll see us get a nice smooth coat. And you want to go and cover all the nail holes Easier to do it now than after you get a finished coat of paint on and then have to putty it and then sand it and then paint it. And then if you have any seams here, you're not always going to get your seams perfect. And that's the beauty of paint grade. So you can then go and get that putty in the seams, wipe it in there. You know, you want to fill that gap and then just let it dry. If there's excess sticking up, also important to wear a mask. This stuff, sanding, respiratory, we've been dealing with respiratory issues. Please wear a mask. I didn't do it when I was younger, and I do it now because I feel terrible. A couple times I haven't worn a mask. I feel really bad at it. So I'm demonstrating using a sanding block right here. Sanding blocks have foam ends. When you're going up against a painted surface, use that foam end against the painted surface. That way, if you're rubbing on it, you won't scratch the wall. Now, in this case, it's okay because I'm going to be painting it, but that's just a trick that may help you out. And you can see I'm scraping off some of the excess of the putty there. Now, this hand sanding gets old, right? So after a while, we're going to break out the power tool. It's also good to keep an old beat up sanding block. There's some times where you need to sand something very lightly. You don't want to use a brand new sanding block. So those old beat up, I have a couple of them laying around. They come in handy. They're like really soft. So you'll notice here's the random orbit sander again. You can go in any direction with a random orbit sander. Just make sure that you cover all the surface. You'll be able to, again, trust your instinct. For a little while, go ahead and feel that surface. When it feels smooth enough, it's good. It's good. You don't have to stand down till the primer is done. So right here, I'm using a Dremel multi-mat, which I really like. As you can see here, it has a triangle sanding head. This comes in very handy for small spaces. You'll notice that I'm going to stand underneath the shelf and get into the tight area. Standing there with a block underneath and doing this and holding your arms up is really tiring. So being able to use a tool like that. So I also recommend vacuuming your surfaces before you paint them. Using a shop vac, just getting a good vacuum of everything. Now, yes, did I sand the bottom and then go sand the top? I did. Is that the right way to do it? No. Use common sense. Again, I probably vacuumed it a bunch of times. So here's what we're talking about, caulking those gaps that you may have on the side. It's very easy to do. You don't have to be a perfectionist with the caulk gun. You'll notice here that I didn't put enough in here. The caulk will let you know you didn't put enough in the area. So you'll see me apply some more and keep a wet rag with you. You use your fingertip, press that caulk into the between the areas, the crack, and get as much as you can out. Wipe it off on that rag, and then go back and touch up that area with the rag, because anything that you leave high on the shelf or high on the wall when it dries, it'll be a line in the area, and you don't want that. So you can see here, just doing some finish work, wiping it off. And if you get some on the wall, that's okay, as long as it's smooth. If you're going to paint that surface afterwards, that's okay. So painting, it's very important when you're painting to keep that brush wet. It's made to hold paint. As you can see here, that nice first even stroke, it's a good base on there. Now, a couple tips when you're doing brush work is you want to get as much paint as you can on quickly, because as that paint starts to dry, it starts to get tacky. And as you go over it, it starts to make more drag marks. And your smooth painted surface becomes harder to obtain. So you want to work fast with the paint. And as you see here where I'm laying the brush flat, that's about the only time you want to do that, is on the big surfaces to get that paint out and onto the material. In painting, everybody says, oh, I got to tape the wall. Try it out. You may not do well at first, but really you got to just look at the tip of the brush and look at that line that the paint is giving you when you lay it onto the material. And you just look at that line and follow that line with your eye and follow along with your arm. As long as you've got enough paint on there, it will flow and help you keep that straight line. I give that to you as a challenge. It may be easier than you think. And it's less time and less money. That blue tape is crazy expensive. It has its purposes, but that's just my thoughts. So we're just touching up the paint here. When you're doing brush work, you want to make sure that you get off any excess or any drips. You want them to be smooth, and always go back over your surface because there may be some high points when you're done that you didn't see. So this is what I was talking about, following that line, get paint on the brush, let the brush do the work. Hold your arm steady and just move your arm along. Come back the other way. Now, I've been painting for a long time, so I've been doing it for a while, but it gets easier the more you do it. Don't give up first try. So we're just finishing up the job here. You can see that now we're painting the wall. It's also important, I see people painting all crazy on the home do-it-yourself shows. Don't do that. Go up and down. The paint is designed to have a stipple. The finish needs to set up with a consistent coat. So you'll see that I'm going over and back rolling everything. That's how it's supposed to look. Don't go zigzagging all over the place, and that's not how you do painting. Here's the finished product. After everything is dried and done, this was designed by my wife. We went over it, went over the layout, and this is how it looks, the finished product here in our bathroom. So I have the materials here that I used. Came out to about $151 plus tax. And then here are all the tools that I used. I didn't put the pricing on there. I've had a lot of these for a long time. All right. So let's go back to wrap it up here. All right. Let me get my last slides here. So thank you, PancakesCon staff, for making this possible. I really enjoy this. I think it's such a great way to let people showcase some of their InfoSec related skills and then hobbies and passions. My name is Blake Regan. You can reach me on Twitter at Crash Override, also on LinkedIn. And this is one of my favorite sayings. It's actually a shirt that my daughter has, so that's why I said anonymous. Do good, be kind. Right? We need each other. We need to build each other up. The InfoSec community needs more people. If you're here and you're new, you're in the right place. Keep putting in that hard work and take chances, right? There are a lot of good people in this industry that can help you get to the right places, but you have to be willing to move outside your comfort zone. So thank you very much. And if there's any questions, I'd like to open it up for questions.
Wow, that was great, Blake. One of the questions was, why not sand, prime, and paint the shelf before putting the shelf on?
So it's a great question. So for me, coming from being a carpenter and painter, as I mentioned, not all the, your wall may be 23.5 inches at one spot and then 23 and 5/8 over here. So you may have to trim these, you may have to trim the material as you install it. And for me, as I mentioned, I like what I found to be successful is that methodology where you start and you scale up. So that's just the way that I like to do it and found to be successful. You also may install something and have to take it out. And do you want to paint it and prime it and sand it twice? So
Good point. Um, Back to the PowerShell portion of the presentation. What level was that, would you say? I mean, is that, kind of beginner level or?
You know, it is, I would say it's moderate. I would say it's beginner, moderate, advanced. And that's one of the reasons that I like sharing my scripts is it has, I like to use some easy stuff and then I tie in some more advanced stuff, but that's the reason, right? If someone knows how to, if they can learn how to create file directories by naming them dynamically on a variable with a timestamp. That may be advanced for them right now. But if they use that code and they're like, okay, this is how I do it. Okay, I can build from here. Or like the invoke command and passing a script block. That blew my mind when I learned how to do that. So I know there's a lot of people out there that are good at PowerShell, but maybe they don't know about this. And there's so many things to learn. So I would say moderate. I would say moderate, and that's the way I wrote it too. It's not a super complicated tool, but you can apply it to different situations too. It may not just be for indicators of compromise to make sure that you're, not having an incident going on. You
Right.
can use it to detect software like, hey, do we have this old version out here? Well, our licensing tool isn't picking it up. Well, do we know the hash? Yeah. Okay, you can put it in that script and go in and get a report, right? So it kind of just enables you to do more with less.
Right. Well, thanks so much, Blake. Beautiful shelves and awesome automation. Have a
Thank you.
great rest of your day and thanks.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.